The mirror fogged up as I stood frozen, my heart hammering so loud I swore it echoed off the bathroom tiles. My roommate, Ethan, had just walked in, shirtless, oblivious, his hazel eyes catching mine in a split second that felt like a lifetime. What he did next shattered every wall I'd built around myself. It was a Tuesday night in our cramped apartment in Asheville, North Carolina, the kind of place where the floorboards creaked and the windows rattled in the mountain breeze. I've been living with Ethan for 6 months, ever since I answered his Craigslist ad for a roommate. I was 24, fresh out of college, scraping by as a barista while chasing a dream of writing novels. Ethan, a year older, was a carpenter, all calloused hands and quiet confidence, with a smile that could light up a room or burn it down, depending on his mood. We were opposites. He was steady, grounded, while I was a mess of overthinking and half-finished manuscripts. But somehow we clicked, or so I thought. That night, I was in the bathroom, brushing my teeth, my mind lost in the latest rejection email from a publisher. The door wasn't locked. Our apartment was so small, we'd gotten careless about boundaries. I heard the knob turn, and before I could react, Ethan was there, leaning against the doorframe, his bare chest glistening from a late-night workout. His dark blonde hair was mussed, and his sweatpants hung low on his hips. I choked on my toothpaste, my face burning. "Sorry, man," he said, his voice low, almost amused. "Didn't know you were in here." I mumbled something incoherent, spitting into the sink, trying to play it cool. But then he didn't leave. He stepped closer, his gaze flickering over me. Not in a casual way, but like he was seeing me for the first time. My breath caught as he reached past me, his arm brushing mine, to grab a towel from the rack. The air crackled with something unspoken, something I've been ignoring for months. See, I'd always known I was gay. I'd known since I was 12, sneaking glances at boys in gym class, feeling my stomach twist in ways I couldn't explain. But I kept it buried, especially here in Asheville, where small-town charm could hide sharp judgments. Ethan, though, he was straight, wasn't he? The way he talked about ex-girlfriends, the way he carried himself, all easy charm and rugged masculinity. I convinced myself my feelings for him were a pointless fantasy, a crush I'd locked away in the same mental box as my failed writing dreams. But that night, as he stood there, inches away, something shifted. "You okay, Caleb?" he asked, his voice softer now, his eyes searching mine. I nodded, but my heart was screaming. He didn't move. Instead, he leaned against the sink, his shoulder brushing mine, and said, "You've been quiet lately, like you're carrying something heavy." I laughed, a nervous, shaky sound. "Just writer's block," I lied. He tilted his head, like he didn't believe me, and for a moment, I thought he might say something else. But then he just nodded, clapped me on the shoulder, and walked out, leaving me staring at my reflection, my face flushed and my mind reeling. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Ethan humming in the kitchen. I dragged myself out of bed, still rattled from the night before. He was at the stove, flipping pancakes, his back to me. "Morning, sunshine," he called without turning around. "Made extra. You in?" I muttered a yes, sitting at our tiny table, trying not to stare the way his t-shirt stretched across his shoulders. We ate in silence at first, the kind that felt heavy with things unsaid. Then he looked at me, his fork paused mid-air. "You ever gonna tell me what's eating you, Caleb?" I froze. "What do you mean?" "You're not just blocked," he said, leaning back in his chair. "You're, I don't know, distant. Like you're hiding something." My pulse raced. Was he fishing? Did he know? I'd never told anyone in Asheville about my sexuality. Not my coworkers, not my friends, and definitely not Ethan. The South wasn't exactly a safe haven for guys like me, and I'd heard enough horror stories to keep my guard up. But Ethan's eyes were steady, not accusing, just curious. Concerned, even. "It's nothing," I said, shoving a bite of pancake into my mouth to avoid his gaze. He didn't push, but the rest of breakfast felt like a tightrope walk. I kept waiting for him to call me out, to somehow know the truth I hadn't even admitted to myself, that I was falling for him, hard, and it terrified me. Over the next few days, Ethan started acting different. He'd linger when we talked, his smiles warmer, his touches, a hand on my arm, a playful shove, more frequent. I told myself I was imagining it, that my stupid crush was twisting my perception. But then came the night at the brewery. We'd gone to our favorite spot, a dive bar with string lights and a jukebox that always played Johnny Cash. I was nursing a beer, trying to focus on the conversation, when Ethan leaned in close, his voice low over the music. "You ever think about getting out of here, Caleb? Like, starting over somewhere new?" I shrugged, my heart thudding. "Sometimes." "Why?" He looked at me, his expression unreadable. "Just wondering what's keeping you here. You don't seem free." The word hit me like a punch. Free. I wasn't free. Not from my fears, Not from the closet I'd locked myself in. I wanted to tell him, to spill everything, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I changed the subject, and he let it drop, but his eyes stayed on me, like he was trying to solve a puzzle. That night, back at the apartment, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment with Ethan. The way he'd looked at me in the bathroom, the way he'd said free at the bar. Was I reading too much into it? Or was there something there? Something real? The next morning, I found a note on the kitchen counter, scrawled in Ethan's messy handwriting. Gone to the workshop. Back late. Let's talk tomorrow. My stomach twisted. Talk about what? I spent the day spiraling, convinced he'd figure me out, that he was going to confront me, maybe even kick me out. By the time he got home, I was a wreck, pacing the living room, my manuscript pages scattered across the coffee table. He walked in, saw me, and stopped. Caleb, he said, his voice gentle but firm. We need to talk. My heart stopped. This was it. The moment everything changed. I stood there, my hands clenching the edge of the coffee table, as Ethan dropped his keys on the counter and crossed the room. His face was serious, but not angry, more like he was bracing himself for something big. My mind raced with worst-case scenarios. He'd seen through me. He knew I was gay. He was going to tell me to move out. Or worse, he'd laugh it off, and I'd be left humiliated, my feelings exposed like a raw nerve. Sit down, man, Ethan said, gesturing to the couch. His voice was steady, but there was a tremor in it, like he was nervous too. I sat, my knees practically knocking together, and he took the chair across from me, leaning forward, elbows on his thighs. The lamplight cast shadows across his face, making his hazel eyes look almost golden. I've been trying to figure out how to say this, he started, rubbing the back of his neck. You're not yourself, Caleb. I see it. You're holding back, and it's killing me to watch. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I don't know what you're talking about. I lied, but my voice cracked, betraying me. Ethan's gaze didn't waver. Come on, he said softly. I know you. You're my best friend in this town, maybe ever. But you're carrying something, and it's eating you up. I want you to trust me. Trust him. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. I wanted to trust him, God, I did. But trust meant opening a door I'd kept locked for years, and the thought of it made my chest tighten. What if he rejected me? What if this, our friendship, our late-night talks, the way he made me feel safe, disappeared? I'm fine. I managed, but it sounded weak even to me. Ethan shook his head, a small, frustrated smile tugging at his lips. You're a terrible liar, he said. Then, before I could respond, he leaned closer, his voice dropping. Caleb, I see the way you look at me. My heart stopped. The room felt too small, the air too thick. I wanted to bolt, to hide, but his eyes held me in place. What? I whispered, barely audible. He took a deep breath, like he was steeling himself. I see it. The way you look at me when you think I'm not paying attention. The way you pull back when I get too close. I'm not blind, man. And I'm not stupid. Panic surged through me. This was it, he knew. I braced for the worst, for him to call me out, to make it clear he wasn't interested. But then he said something that turned my world upside down. I look at you that way too. The words didn't register at first. They hung in the air, unreal, like a line from one of my half-written stories. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. Ethan's face softened, and he stood, crossing the small space between us to sit next to me on the couch. His knee brushed mine, and I flinched, not because I didn't want it, but because I wanted it too much. Ethan, I started, but he cut me off. Let me finish, he said, his voice gentle but firm. I've been trying to figure this out for months. I've never felt this way about a guy before. Hell, I didn't even know I could. But with you, it's different. You're different. My head was spinning. Ethan, the guy I'd been secretly in love with for months, was sitting here, saying he felt something for me. It was too much, too fast. I stood up, pacing to the window, needing air, needing space. The mountains loomed in the distance, dark and silent under the night sky. Are you saying? I trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. He stood too, stepping closer, his presence warm and solid behind me. I'm saying I'm scared as hell, he admitted, his voice raw. But I'm also saying I don't want to keep pretending I don't feel this. I don't know what it means, Caleb, but I know it's real. I turned to face him, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. His eyes were searching mine, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen before. And then, without thinking, I closed the distance between us and kissed him. It was tentative at first, a brush of lips like testing the waters. But then he kissed me back, his hands finding my waist, pulling me closer, and the world fell away. It was just us, the heat of his skin, the softness of his mouth, the way his breath hitched like he was just as lost in it as I was. When we finally pulled apart, I was breathless, my hands trembling against his chest. Jesus, Caleb, he whispered, his forehead resting against mine. That was... Yeah, I said because words failed me. We stood there, wrapped in each other, the weight of what we'd just done settling over us. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. But the world didn't stop turning. The next day, reality crept in. We were cautious around each other, stealing glances, unsure how to navigate this new thing between us. I wanted to believe it was real, that Ethan meant what he'd said, but doubt gnawed at me. What if he changed his mind? What if this was just a moment, not a future? At work, I was distracted, spilling coffee and messing up orders. My coworker, Sarah, noticed. "You okay, Caleb?" she asked, her brow furrowed. I nodded, but I wasn't. I was falling for Ethan, and it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. That night, Ethan suggested we go for a walk. The air was crisp, the streets quiet as we wandered through downtown Asheville, passing art galleries and buskers playing soft guitar melodies. We didn't hold hands, but our shoulders brushed, and every touch sent a jolt through me. I meant what I said. Ethan told me as we stopped by a fountain, the water glinting under the streetlights. "I'm in this, Caleb, but I need you to be honest with me. Are you?" I wanted to say yes, to tell him I was all in, but the fear was still there, a shadow I couldn't shake. "I'm trying," I said finally. "I've never done this before. Not like this." He nodded, his expression soft. "Me neither, but we'll figure it out. Together." For the first time, I let myself believe him. But as we walked back home, a figure stepped out of the shadows. A guy from Ethan's carpentry crew, his face twisted with disgust. "Didn't know you were into that, Ethan," he sneered, his voice loud enough to draw stares. Ethan froze, his jaw tightening. And in that moment, I saw the fear in his eyes, the same fear I'd carried for years. The world wasn't as safe as we'd hoped. The air turned cold as the guy's words hung between us, sharp and venomous. Ethan's hand, which had been brushing mine, dropped to his side, and I felt the distance grow in an instant. The guy, Jake, I remembered, one of Ethan's co-workers, stood there, his smirk cutting deeper than any insult. A few passers-by glanced our way, their curiosity stinging like salt in a wound. "Mind your own business, Jake," Ethan said, his voice low, controlled, but I could hear the edge in it. He stepped forward, putting himself between me and Jake, like a shield. My heart pounded, torn between gratitude and dread. This was the moment I'd feared, the world intruding, judging, threatening to tear apart what we'd just found. Jake laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Didn't peg you for a queer man. Guess I was wrong." He spat the word like it was poison, and I flinched, my old instinct screaming at me to run, to hide. But Ethan didn't back down. "Walk away," he said, his voice steady now, his shoulders squared. Jake held his gaze for a moment, then shrugged, tossing one last sneer my way before disappearing into the crowd. The tension lingered, heavy and suffocating, as Ethan turned to me. "You okay?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. I nodded, but I wasn't. My chest felt tight, my mind racing with memories of high school taunts, of whispers behind my back, of the fear that had kept me silent for so long. Ethan reached for my hand, but I pulled away, not because I didn't want him, but because I was terrified of what this moment meant. "Caleb," he said softly, stepping closer. "Don't let him get to you. He's nobody." But he wasn't nobody. He was the voice of every doubt I'd ever had, every reason I'd stayed in the closet. And now, he was a reminder that Ethan wasn't just risking his heart. He was risking his reputation, his job, his place in this town. I couldn't shake the image of his fear in that split second, the way his eyes had flickered with uncertainty. We walked home in silence, the magic of the night shattered. Back at the apartment, I retreated to my room, claiming I was tired, but really I just needed to think. I sat on my bed, staring at the manuscript pages scattered across my desk, the words blurring as my thoughts churned. Ethan had said he was in this, but was he ready for what it meant? Was I? The next morning, I found Ethan in the kitchen, making coffee, his movements tense. He didn't look at me right away, and that small hesitation felt like a chasm. "We need to talk about last night," he said finally, setting a mug in front of me. I nodded, my stomach twisting. "I'm sorry," I said before I could stop myself. "I didn't mean to. I don't know, put you in that position." His brow furrowed. "Put me in what position?" "Caleb, that wasn't your fault. Jake's an asshole." "But it's not just Jake," I said, my voice shaking. "It's this town. It's everywhere. You saw how he looked at us. What if your crew finds out? What if you lose work because of me?" Ethan's jaw tightened, and he set his mug down hard. "You think I care what they think? I don't. I care about you." His words hit me like a wave, warm and overwhelming, but the fear didn't vanish. "You say that now," I said quietly. But you've never had to deal with this. I have. I've spent my whole life hiding, Ethan. I know what it's like to lose people because of who I am. He looked at me, his expression softening. I'm not going anywhere, he said. But I need you to meet me halfway. You can't keep shutting me out. I wanted to believe him, to let go of the fear, but it wasn't that simple. The rest of the week was a blur of awkward silences and stolen glances. Ethan tried to act normal, cracking jokes, brushing his hand against mine when we passed in the hall, but I could feel the strain. I was pulling back, and he knew it. Then came the night of the bonfire. Ethan's carpentry crew was hosting a get-together at a clearing in the woods, a tradition they did every fall. He'd invited me, insisting it would be fun, but after the run-in with Jake, I wasn't so sure. Still, I went, hoping maybe it would bridge the gap between us. The fire crackled, casting flickering light across the faces of Ethan's coworkers. Most of them were friendly, passing me a beer, asking about my writing. But Jake was there, his eyes glinting with malice every time he looked our way. I stayed close to Ethan, my nerves on edge, but he seemed determined to prove something, standing closer to me than he needed to, his arm brushing mine. As the night wore on, the beer flowed, and the conversation turned louder, rowdier. Jake's voice cut through the noise, directed at Ethan. So, you and your roommate seem pretty tight, he said, his tone dripping with insinuation. A few heads turned, and my stomach dropped. Ethan's smile didn't falter, but I saw the tension in his shoulders. Yeah, he said evenly. Caleb's my guy. The words were simple, but they hit me hard. My guy. It was the closest he'd come to claiming this, us, in public. But Jake wasn't done. He leaned forward, his grin cruel. Your guy, huh? Didn't know you swung that way, Ethan. The air went still. I felt every eye on us, the weight of their judgment pressing down. Ethan's hand found mine under the cover of the darkness, squeezing tight, and I realized he wasn't backing down. Maybe I do, he said, his voice steady, his eyes locked on Jake's. You got a problem with that? The silence stretched, taut and dangerous. Then one of the other guys laughed, breaking the tension. Leave him alone, Jake, he said, tossing a stick into the fire. You're just jealous nobody's looking at you like that. The group chuckled, and the moment passed, but I could feel Jake's stare burning into us. Ethan didn't let go of my hand, and for the first time, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe we could do this. Maybe we could face the world together. But as we drove home, the weight of what had happened settled over me. Ethan had stood up for us, but at what cost? I glanced at him, his profile lit by the dashboard lights, and wondered how long he could keep fighting before the world fought back. The days after the bonfire felt like walking on a tightrope. Ethan was bolder now, touching me in small ways. A hand on my back, a brush of fingers when we passed dishes at dinner, like he was testing the waters of this new reality. I wanted to meet him there, to match his courage, but every time I thought about it, Jake's sneer flashed in my mind, a reminder of the world waiting to judge us. At the coffee shop, I overheard whispers. Asheville was small, and gossip spread like wildfire. A customer, someone I recognized from Ethan's crew, gave me a long look as I handed him his latte. You're Ethan's roommate, right? He asked, his tone neutral but probing. I nodded, my heart racing, and he just smirked and walked away. I spent the rest of my shift paranoid, convinced everyone knew, convinced they were all talking. That night, I came home to find Ethan in the living room, sanding a small wooden box he'd been working on in his workshop. The air smelled of sawdust and varnish, and he looked up with a smile that made my chest ache. Made this for you, he said, holding it out. It was simple but beautiful, with intricate carvings of mountains along the edges. Inside, he'd tucked a folded note for your stories. Keep writing. I stared at the box, my throat tight. Ethan, this is... I didn't know how to finish. No one had ever done something like this for me. Seen me so clearly. I wanted to tell him how much it meant, how much he meant, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I hugged him, my arms tight around his shoulders, and he hugged me back, his warmth grounding me. But the peace didn't last. The next morning, Ethan got a call from his boss. I was in the kitchen, pouring coffee, when I heard his voice sharpen. What do you mean, concerns? He said, pacing. Who's talking? I froze, the mug burning my hand as I listened. When he hung up, his face was pale, his jaw tight. Jake's been running his mouth, he said, tossing his phone onto the counter. Told the crew I'm distracted, that I'm not focused on work. My boss wants to meet tomorrow. My stomach dropped. Because of me? I asked, my voice small. No, Ethan said quickly, crossing to me. Because Jake's a prick. This isn't your fault, Caleb. But it felt like my fault. I'd dragged Ethan into this, into a world he wasn't ready for. Maybe we should slow down, I said, the words tasting like ash. Just until things settle. Ethan's eyes darkened. You don't mean that? I do. I lie, my heart breaking. I don't want you to lose your job, your friends, everything. Not for me. He stepped closer, his hands cupping my face. You think I'd give this up? Give you up? I'm not that guy, Caleb. I'm not running. His words were a lifeline, but I was still drowning in fear. That night, we lay in bed together for the first time, not doing anything but holding each other, his heartbeat steady against my back. It was the closest I'd ever felt to home, but the fear lingered, a shadow in the corner of the room. The meeting with Ethan's boss went better than expected. He kept his job, but the warning was clear. Keep your personal life out of work. Ethan came home quiet, his usual spark dimmed. I tried to cheer him up, cooking dinner, playing his favorite music, but the strain was there, a crack in the foundation of what we were building. Then came the letter. It was slipped under our door, anonymous, typed in cold, black ink. Fags don't belong here. Get out. My hand shook as I read it, the words searing into me. Ethan found me sitting on the floor, the letter crumpled in my fist. He read it, his face hardening, and then he pulled me into his arms. We're not going anywhere, he said fiercely. This is our home. But it didn't feel like home anymore. The next day, I found graffiti on my car, more slurs scrawled in red paint. I scrubbed it off before Ethan could see, but the damage was done. I was spiraling, my old fears roaring back. I started avoiding Ethan, staying late at the coffee shop, burying myself in my writing, anything to keep the panic at bay. Ethan noticed. Of course he did. One night, he cornered me in the living room, his eyes blazing. You're pulling away again, he said. Talk to me, Caleb. Please. I broke. The words poured out. About the letter, the graffiti, the fear that I was ruining his life. He listened, his face softening, and when I was done, he pulled me close, his voice low. I'm not afraid of them, he said. I'm afraid of losing you. We kissed, slow and desperate, and for a moment, I believed we could weather this. But the next morning, I woke to an email from my landlord. Complaints have been made. We need to discuss your lease. My heart sank. The world was closing in, and I didn't know how much longer we could hold on. That afternoon, Ethan took me to the rooftop of our building, the place we'd gone a few times to watch the sunset. The mountains stretched out before us, endless and unmoving, and he took my hand, his grip firm. We're stronger than this, he said. You and me. We can face anything. I wanted to believe him. I want to be brave. But as we stood there, the wind carrying the first chill of autumn, I couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. The landlord's meeting was a gut punch. He sat across from us in his stuffy office, his face pinched with discomfort. I've had complaints, he said, avoiding our eyes. Neighbors saying you're disrupting the community. He didn't say the word, but it hung in the air, gay. He gave us 30 days to vacate. Ethan's hand tightened around mine under the table, but I could barely feel it. The world I'd feared was here, slamming the door shut on the life we'd been trying to build. Back at the apartment, Ethan was furious, pacing, ranting about fighting it, about finding a lawyer. But I was numb. All I could think about was the letter, the graffiti, the way Jake's sneer had spread like a virus. This wasn't just about us anymore. It was about a town that didn't want us, a world that wasn't ready. That night, I packed a bag. Not much, just clothes, my laptop, the wooden box Ethan had made me. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay. I couldn't keep dragging Ethan down with me. I wrote him a note, my hands shaking. I'm sorry. I love you, but I can't do this to you. I left it on the kitchen counter and slipped out before dawn, the mountains looming like silent judges in the darkness. I ended up at a cheap motel on the edge of town, the kind with flickering neon signs and stained carpets. I sat on the bed, staring at my phone, Ethan's text piling up. Where are you? Caleb, please. Come home. Each one broke me a little more, but I couldn't go back. I'd spent my life running from who I was, and now I was running from the one person who'd made me feel whole. Days blurred into nights. I worked double shifts at the coffee shop, avoiding Sarah's worried glances, dodging Ethan's calls. But Asheville was too small to hide forever. A week later, he found me, waiting outside the motel, his truck parked crookedly like he'd sped there. His face was a storm of anger and hurt, his eyes red-rimmed. Why? He demanded, his voice breaking. Why'd you leave? I couldn't look at him. Because I'm ruining your life, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Your job, your home, your friends, it's all falling apart because of me. He stepped closer, his hands grabbing my shoulders. You think I care about that? I care about you, Caleb. I love you. The words hit me like a tidal wave. Love. He never said it before, not like that. I wanted to collapse into him, to let him hold me together, but the fear was still there, clawing at me. You don't get it, I said, tears burning my eyes. This town, these people, they'll destroy us. I can't let that happen to you. Then we leave, he said, his voice fierce. We start over. Together. I don't care where, as long as it's with you. I shook my head, but he didn't let go. He pulled me into his arms, and I broke, sobbing against his chest, the weight of everything pouring out. He held me, his own tears falling into my hair, and for the first time, I felt the truth of his words. He wasn't running. Not from me, not from us. We moved to Portland, Oregon, a month later. It wasn't easy, new jobs, a new apartment, a new life to build from scratch. But it was ours. Ethan found work with a construction crew that didn't care who he loved, and I started submitting my novel again. The one I'd pour my heart into, the one Ethan's wooden box had held. We faced challenges, whispers, sidelong glances, but they were softer here, less sharp, and we faced them together. One night, on our new rooftop, the city lights sprawling below us, Ethan took my hand and pulled me close. "You're my home, Caleb," he said, his voice steady sure. "No matter where we are." I looked at him, his face lit by the moon, and I knew he meant it. We'd fought for this, through fear, through hate, through the weight of a world that tried to tear us apart. And we'd won. Not because we'd defeated every bigot or silenced every whisper, but because we'd chosen each other over and over again. My novel got published a year later, dedicated to Ethan, the man who'd walked into a bathroom and changed my life. The last line of the book read, "Love doesn't win by being loud. It wins by being brave." And as I stood on that rooftop, his arms around me, I knew we were the bravest people I'd ever met.